I'm Frank Boyer, and I'm here to introduce a terrific project that involves two Polish artists or artists of Polish origin. The two artists who we'll be talking about today are Fryderyk Chopin and Jan Sawka. And these two artists were both part of the long Polish tradition of Polish émigré artists and intellectuals that formed in reaction to oppression in Poland. Poland was an emergent democracy when authoritarian regimes on its borders essentially dismembered the country and completely dominated the political life in Poland. Many of these émigrés made profound contributions to world culture while living outside of their homeland. Although the circumstances of each émigré's act of emigration or departure was unique, I wish to point out that the fact that both of these men found that conditions in Poland did not allow them to remain and fully express their talents is something we should not forget. One can say that they left to pursue better opportunities, but to say that is to emphasize the economic conditions and minimizes not only the political dimension, but also the psychological issues of identity and artistic integrity that drove their emigration. In Jan Sawka's case, he was given three choices. He could give up his independent voice in regards to politics. He could become an artist who would function with state support, but under state control as to the content of his art, which would result in works that were at best philosophical, directed towards topics, the political dimensions of which the state would find comfortable, if not directly advocating the official propagandistic line. Or he could have chosen to be a teacher in an isolated rural community and have no opportunity to show, no opportunity to show internationally, and no opportunity essentially to create his work. Or he could leave Poland. He chose to preserve his artistic integrity, and with his wife and small child, he emigrated. The case of Chopin is hardly less stark. In 1830, a month after he left Poland for Western Europe, the November insurrection against the Russian occupation and oppression of Central and Eastern Poland broke out, leading to even harsher measures to enforce Russian dominance. A people does not rise up spontaneously unless the conditions have become intolerable. Chopin chose to join the well-established émigré art scene in Paris, where he could create his work in keeping with his conscience. A return to Poland, although perhaps possible at some points in the 18 years of his exile, would probably have cost world culture dearly by depriving us of the sublime works he produced in exile. Certainly, Chopin chose never to return. Having known oppression in their homeland, is there any wonder that both these artists worked tirelessly to manifest their talents and always advocated in their art for human freedom? We have with us Hanna Maria Sawka, Jan Sawka's daughter and my co-curator. for the exhibition, The Place of Memory, The Memory of Place at the Dorsky Museum, who will speak about the works that are in that exhibition in regards to her father's life and his experience as an émigré and his experiences under persecution in Poland. And we also have with us Aleksander Laskowski from the Chopin Institute in Warsaw, Poland. And he will be speaking in regards to the art and life of Fryderyk Chopin.
Hi, my name is Hanna Maria Sawka, and I'm the co-curator of the show at the Dorsky of Jan Sawka's art. Jan Sawka was my father, so you're getting a bit of a family perspective here. And I would like to talk about the artworks in the exhibition that relate to the theme of this program of exile and memory. So I would like to start with the artwork that actually is the first painting in the show. It's called Fading, and it shows a landscape that is, if you look carefully, an Italian landscape. If you look at the trees, those types of trees are typical for, in fact, a Tuscan landscape, the cypresses and the pines. And also, if you look at the small building, the pitch of the roof is also typical for Tuscany. The painting shows several spots of bright color, which seems to be the original color of the entire image. And with the painting's title of Fading, that indicates that this memory of this place, this image in our mind, has mostly faded. There are only a few locations that kind of retain their original color. Of course, it's not literally the way that memories might fade. It's a metaphor of that. And I'd like to say, I mean, that's my interpretation. If you may look at the painting and understand it differently. I do think the title is meant to guide us in that direction. But I would like to share, since I knew my dad pretty well, what I knew about his feelings about Italy specifically. And he first of all loved Italy as a place of a great artistic tradition and a place of aesthetics. In fact, when he was a student in Wrocław, one of his favorite classes was with a professor of landscape design who talked a lot about Italian landscape design. And he loved the idea of how much landscape design was implemented in Italy, how entire municipalities and towns, even rural areas, really thought about the beauty of the landscape around them. My father spent some time in Italy. He, as a student, won an internship at the great design studio of Pininfarina, which designs the bodies of cars such as Ferrari, Lancia, Alfa Romeo, and many others. They've designed things for BMW as well, for Japanese car companies. And he was in fact offered a job there, but he wanted to be an artist. He didn't want design to be his, he really did see himself as an artist. And then there was another thing, that at that time, Italy had a very strong communist party and communist movement. From what I understand from my family, from behind the Iron Curtain, money was channeled to support those communist movements, not only in Italy, but in France. And so there were a lot of people who favored communism, who were active in the art fields, art and culture fields, and my father didn't feel that he could be welcome as a person. I mean, ironically, because he was from a very left, actually, a family that had very progressive views, However, the very fact that he was in exile and the very fact that money was being channeled from behind the Iron Curtain, he didn't feel that it would be a favorable place. So in a sense, he wasn't only exiled from his homeland, he couldn't necessarily live in any place that he loved, or that maybe even had opportunities for him. So in a sense, it's yet another exile that he experienced. So that's Fading, and you will see, if you look at the postcards, there are several postcards that show Italy as well, including one of trees in silhouette in Florence. In the manuscript, my father describes walking up the hill in hopes of seeing a view on a rainy day, of never actually seeing it, but still being very happy to be there. And one is also, one image is from northern Italy, and it shows a very unpleasant landscape. It's actually not that beautiful side of Italy. It's this kind of industrial area on the outskirts of a city. And it's from, that memory is from the time when he toured with a theater from Poland. And they were very poor. They were from behind the Iron Curtain, and they were having trouble finding a place to stay. And that kind of landscape, these kind of post-industrial landscapes, that is another side of Italy. And I would say that my father would kind of look at both sides, the beautiful, you know, areas that you would enjoy visiting, but also kind of the dark side, the underbelly. You know, Italian filmmakers have also shown these kinds of wasteland areas, and that's definitely one of them. So the postcards show a number of stops that my father made on his way through his life initially. Of course, as a person growing up in Poland, there's one very interesting postcard which is called The Broken Plate, and it is about the very, very furthest, earliest memories and how fragmentary they are. It certainly is a Polish landscape. And there are other landscapes, such as one of the Raba River, which is shown as this very peaceful blue line through a verdant green landscape. But the memory is about how this little river at some point became a terrifying monster during a flood, and my father recounts how he would keep asking his grandmother to tell the story of the flood and houses floating down this river that looks so harmless, including the specific detail of seeing a candle still in the window of one of the houses that was being swept away. There's also one of a field that he observed, the light suddenly bursting, very much memory about just the beauty of nature and light. Light, of course, is of interest to artists, always. And there's the girlfriend's house, just a random snippet of something from when he was a young man. Once there start being postcards about other places, the postcards explore the initial kind of time of exile. So there are some images from Paris and France in general. I find one of them particularly striking because it mainly shows a wall and just a little bit of the house kind of peeking from behind it. The image of the wall is forbidding. It is the main subject of this postcard, and it could be about any wall anywhere in the world that's meant to keep people out. Of course, people from behind the Iron Curtain would think a lot about the Berlin Wall. Now, in this day and age, there's talk of walls as well, and I feel that that wall is very deliberate and very unfriendly. And if we hadn't had my father's manuscript. I think the image already conveys that. However, we do have the manuscript, and what my father noted in it was that in the neighborhood where my family lived in our very first year of exile, there were walls between all the properties, and he noted that that the only neighbor we knew was an Italian. She was an immigrant, first generation immigrant, and that she knew nobody else in the neighborhood. So kind of a bit of a chilling memory from France of just this observation of people separating themselves from others. There's also one from Honfleur, which is on the French coast, and it shows an allée of trees. And if you have a close look at the show, that same alley appears in another piece that's also about memory in a large painting called Partial Recall. And you'll see it on the left side of Partial Recall, that exact same alley. I always viewed that painting mainly in terms of what's pictured there and the title, Partial Recall, so not remembering everything. It shows a group of people whose faces are no longer, they're not there. Their faces have become part of this just kind of floating area of all kinds of other, almost a visual cacophony of probably memories of other places. There are distinct places indicated, such as a mountain that might be in Japan, palm trees that are surely in Los Angeles. When we were actually, when we got the manuscript about the postcards, where you could see that exact same alley in one of the images, we learned from the manuscript that this alley was observed in Honfleur when the curators from the Pompidou Center took my parents on a trip to the French coast. And the memories that my father reflects on with that image are about the artists who were very poor and were struggling, the great artists of Impressionism, and who, some of whom depicted Honfleur. And now the impression I have from what my father wrote is kind of like, you know, now tourists go there. But in the past, this is actually a place of struggle and not at all as romantic maybe as people might feel about it when they go and visit now. So it's really fun to find this kind of little kind of secret note almost, you know, in a painting that gives us a hint that, well, this must be a memory from Honfleur, and the faces are gone. A little bit of the landscape is there to indicate where it is. So the postcards continue, luckily, past exile and into the life that no longer was imposed, but you know, my family could have gone back. Communism fell in Poland, and in fact, my father was invited back. He had a big exhibition after the fall of communism called the Returns. In fact, my family, we were given our citizenship, our Polish citizenships back, and we had just gotten our American citizenships, and we got to keep both. But it was wonderful to be basically symbolically welcomed back to Poland. But my father had already established a life here, and friends and projects. So you can also see, I'd like to take special note of images of the Hudson Valley, which is where my family moved after some years in New York City, and which is the location of my late father's beloved studio. It was exactly the place, because, I mean, he designed it, that was ideal from his point of view for his work and his creativity. And it was surrounded by a landscape that, I have to note, they bought the property in the Hudson Valley before they knew communism would fall. And one of the reasons for the choice was that the landscape reminded both of them of the mountains in the south of Poland, where, not knowing each other as children, they had vacationed. So there's a bit of, there was a bit of that thought of, well, we'll never visit our beloved mountains in Poland, the Pieniny Mountains, but we can live in a place that's also beautiful and that reminds us of that place. So I'd like to bring your attention to the postcard about Mohonk Mountain, which High Falls, where the studio is located nearby. And another one is of the Ashokan Reservoir, showing a blizzard starting. The Ashokan Reservoir was a favorite place for my father, of course with my mother, and when I was little and at home with me, to go for walks. A place of an absolutely stunning view of the Catskill Mountains surrounding a great artificial lake. And the show includes a much bigger work, a really, really big work about the Ashokan Reservoir. And of course, this now is a place no longer kind of, let's say, contaminated by exile. It is just a place to enjoy and to contemplate. And the Ashokan 1, 2, 3, and 4, the set of 4 triptychs is inspired by this beloved place, in the place that became home for Jan Sawka and for our family. So I hope that you enjoy looking at the works in the show. Right now during the pandemic, you might be looking from far away, but we welcome you warmly to contemplate it, to think also about what place might mean for you. And for all of us, some of us can't visit places right now because of the pandemic. So please enjoy the art.
Thank you, Hanna, for that wonderful discussion of your father's work in relation to the theme of and the fact of exile. Alec, could you outline for us briefly the relationship of Chopin's work to his life experience in relation to exile and to the theme of exile? Show us how, or speak to how we can find that theme present in his work.
Of course. Well, it's not that direct as in the case of Jan Sawka's work. And first, because it is music, and second, because it was the 19th century, and third, because Chopin's story was different. So he left Poland in pursuit of a career, but then the uprising against the Tsarist Russia broke out, and he became, in a way, a stateless person, because technically there was no Poland to go back to. So he got really stranded in the world. Luckily for him, he had good letters of recommendation, and he actually, I loved Hanna's story about this Italian woman in France that was the only person he could meet. Actually, Chopin was lucky to meet the high society of Paris and became a regular at the best drawing rooms. He had pupils from the best society. So he had his partner, Georges Sand, who was a great French artist.
Well, I mean, my father was just talking about the neighborhood. You know, he was at the Centre Georges Pompidou, which was it's still one of the premier museums of modern art in Paris, and
yeah, I know, I understand that, but it's just a kind of different context that society was a bit different at that time. That was what was really my point, because much of the life was happening not at official places like Centre Pompidou. There was no Centre Pompidou. the drawing rooms were the places where actually cultural life happened. And in a way, Chopin had a happy life in these drawing rooms in Paris. That is where he lived. That was his adoptive country. And he was of French origin too. His father was French. He was fluent in the French language. So he was not really trying to make a career in a land that was unknown to him. And he was extremely successful, you have to say. A 20-year-old who becomes the talk of the town in Paris, where actually every pianist from Europe wanted to make a career in Paris. So that was fantastic. But there is a quality in Chopin's music that explains the émigré spirit. You can actually learn a lot about him from his letters. There is a beautiful English translation by David Frick, which we published, and I recommend reading that to anyone who wants to understand the depth of Chopin's intellect and the background for his music. But there is this longing quality which makes his music so special. So to put it in a very simple way, his homeland existed, but it did not exist as an independent country. And he created a Poland for himself in his music. If you look at the music very closely, it is absolutely idealized. He's not quoting folk music. He's inventing folk music that is even better than the actual folk music. He's using the traditional Polish dances, like the Polonaise, a really stately, dance that belonged to the upper classes, to the gentry, and transforms it into a story of suffering and heroism. Actually, a quote I like very much comes from before Chopin's emigration by Robert Schumann, another great romantic composer, who said that Chopin's music is canons hidden amidst flowers. So that was the power of this music. And this music was actually so powerful that, for example, during World War II, during the Nazi occupation, Chopin's music was forbidden because it was too strong. It gave courage to people. It gave spirit to people. So you have two sides. The nostalgia, what we call żal in Polish. The French call it le żal, and that is actually the word also used in the English literature, because it's not a simple nostalgia. It's a very Polish nostalgia, which I'm sure you will also find in Jan Sawka's work, because it is, you miss your homeland, but you represent it in your work in an idealized way, or you analyze what you feel about your homeland. So that is, I think, what in a very general way brings the two great artists together from different epochs and in different genres. You have music and you have visual arts, but still Chopin represented his country. And actually, if you ask any Polish immigrant, and I have quite a few in my family, where is Poland for you? It is in Chopin's music. If you ask a foreigner, where is Poland? What represents Poland for you? Chopin's music. You take the mazurkas, take the polonaises, but also take the waltzes. He stole the waltzes from the society and made them Polish, really. So this is a kind of very special Polishness that I think could only have been nurtured by the émigré nostalgia, by the fact that he missed his family, his homeland, his friends, the countryside, Warsaw as his hometown. You name it, you have it in the music, but not in a direct way. And I think that is the beauty of Chopin's work in general, and that is a very special trait of his genius, that he made his art absolutely appealing to anyone, anywhere in the world, at any time, and yet made it very specific. If you're a Polish person, Artur Rubinstein, a great Polish émigré artist, said that Chopin, for him, is like coming home. So it is a home for all the human beings, I think, and that is what makes it so special.
Thank you, Alec, for illuminating Chopin's work for us so beautifully, and essentially providing, along with Hanna, an angle of vision and an avenue of approach to the works of these two artists, who are the subject of our beautiful project. Hanna, is there anything that Alex said in his remarks that you would like to address as someone who is of origin Polish, but you may not remember Poland at all from your childhood?
Oh no, I was only a baby in Poland, but I did
So,
several years. I went back for film school, so I did live in Poland as an adult for 10 years.
yes. So, is there anything in his remarks to which you would like to that you would like to address?
I'm actually fascinated, Alec, by that whole idea of Chopin being forbidden. Were there any other times that you know of that that Chopin was forbidden or censored?
No, it was actually only during the Nazi occupation. However, if you look closely at the reception of Chopin's music, well, I personally like to think that the way Chopin is represented in Poland tells you a lot about what Poland is at a given time. So in the 19th century, he was the homeland, the independent country we wanted to have. And that's represented in the music symbolically, if you like. Take the heroic Polonaise. And in the 20s, in the newborn republic, he was really like the official soundtrack of the country. That is when the Chopin competition was born. And every pianist played Chopin's music. And then, you know, during World War II, as I said, the Nazis forbade his music. And then there was a very special moment after World War II, because Arthur Rubinstein performed at the inauguration of the United Nations, and he noticed that the Polish flag was missing in the set. They forgot about it. And he played the Polish anthem and Chopin. So that is a very strong statement, really, to make. Funnily enough, you know, in the communist days, the communists wanted to appropriate Chopin. And there is a movie, The Young Chopin, from the 50s, where he's shown as a kind of idealist, communist young boy avant la lettre, before the time of communism, really. He is against the gentry who oppress the working classes, the peasants, and he defends the peasants, and he abhors the palaces in which he has to perform. So it's strange to look at now. It's a well-done movie, actually, but it's a propaganda movie. And that is how they portray Chopin. And you can do a lot with music, because the music doesn't have any text to defend itself. So then it changed. Now I think we are very happy to see the universal genius of his music, which appeals to everyone and belongs to all the humanity, but still is so very specifically Polish. It's kind of two-sided coin. You have the eagle, the Polish national emblem on the one side, but you have humanity on the other side if you flip the coin.
No, that's fascinating. That I guess the communists realized we probably can't get away with banning him, so we'll reinvent him. Oh, that's really interesting. Thank you. In general, with occupations, culture and art can be just as Alec pointed out with the communist attempt to appropriate Chopin. My father had to kind of walk before his exile. Once it reached that point, things had gone too far. But prior, in the years before his exile, he kind of was trying to negotiate this fine line of expressing himself and of being kind of useful to the regime for kind of propagandistic, kind of not mass propagandistic use, but for it wasn't just my father, but especially creators of the Polish school of the poster. The posters were used to kind of show to the West that there was creative freedom in Poland. And a particular poster of my father's that kind of showed the tightrope literally walk was a circus poster my father designed that showed a crowd ogling a person on a tightrope high above. And if you looked closely at that tiny little figure, he was wearing prison stripes. So of course it was the censors actually didn't notice that the guy was wearing prison stripes, but people in Poland did. But the posters weren't only about the people in Poland and what they would see, but some of the posters that my father made were really kind of, they showed this like 1960s fun expressiveness. They weren't political, and they were exported to the West to show this, like, you know, it's fun behind the Iron Curtain. People are having a good time, when of course that wasn't true. It was an absolutely repressive regime. So it's very interesting what happens with art in these kinds of contexts of political oppression.
And I think that Alec beautifully spoke to the fact that art can be very specific to the context of one's origins, to one's national origins, and yet in the hands of a consummate artist, that art can be completely universal. So it can be both, you know, for and of a people through this person, but it can also be for and of all people. And I think both of these artists exemplify that.
Yeah, I do want to say that, you know, I spoke about the postcards. If we hadn't found the manuscript with the specific stories and memories associated, they, you know, they were meant to just be viewed actually as landscapes, as, for example, an image of a wall, an uninviting wall, or an image of a, you know, post-industrial wasteland, or of a beautiful landscape. The fact that we found, the manuscript we found was never meant actually for the public. But we felt it was a really great opportunity to share yet another, you know, element in the show.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed looking at the art. Of course, I would have enjoyed looking at it live much more, but still, just to conclude, I would say that whatever you're looking for in life, you'll find it in Chopin's music. So I hope you'll listen to it and enjoy it. And if you are a performing artist, will enjoy it in depth, performing it. But even listening is very rewarding. Thank you.
Okay, and Hanna, would you like to say anything?
Well, I hope that you enjoy the show, and I hope that it will encourage all of us to think about how we remember things, why some things stay in our minds, why some don't. And as a lifelong, I guess I'm a typical Polish fan of Chopin, that is certainly also music that creates images in the mind as well. So let's enrich ourselves, especially during the pandemic, and explore these expressions.
Okay, thanks to both of you. And I'd like to just offer once more the invitation to anyone who is interested in participating in this project to play their piece of Chopin, listen to Chopin, look at the art, find your own interpretations, your own connections, And look into your heart and try to participate as much as works for you. Thank you very much.